Barry, you can mute yourself. We're picking up noise. Thank you. Okay. Let's bow in, everybody. And welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening. The weekly class. We're studying the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma by Chogyam Trungpa. And we are on volume 2, chapter 3 this week. We're just beginning to get into it. So welcome everyone, and to new people as well. So I'm going to give a talk for a little while and then we'll have a discussion. I'm just going to review a bit. The Tibetan Buddhist path is divided into stages. They're called yanas. Yana means vehicles. And the three main yanas are the Hinayana, which is translated as the lesser vehicle, but we prefer to think of it as the foundational vehicle. The Mahayana, which is the greater vehicle, and the Vajrayana, the adamantine or indestructible vehicle, or it's also called the Tantrayana and the Mantrayana. These are all synonyms. They mean slightly different things, but they refer to the same bodies of teachings. And we have finished the first volume on the Hinayana, and we're now moving into the second stage, the Mahayana. These teachings developed in India about 2 centuries after the Buddha's passing. Buddhism is constantly developing and evolving. There is no sort of catechism or catechismic version of Buddhism. Buddhism is a constantly evolving body of teachings. And this happened after the Buddha's death. They continued to evolve. And in about the 3rd century BC, one of the schools that appeared was called the Greater Sangha, Mahasangikas, and that evolved into what is now we think of as the Mahayana. And starting around the time of Christ, the millennium, around 0 BC, 0 AD, Buddhism left India. It had already departed from India in about the 2nd or 3rd century BC, and it went to Southeast Asia. And the school that went there was the school that was called in India, was called the Theravada. It means doctrine of the elders. And when it went to Southeast Asia, it went through Ceylon and was translated into Pali as Theravada, which means the same thing, doctrine of the elders. And this is really what the later Buddhists called the Hinayana. They were sort of putting it down. They're saying that their version was better. And the Mahayana, which developed after that, went to China, as I say, around 0 BC, 0 AD. And from China, it spread in the 7th century AD to Japan. And about the 6th century, it went to Korea. And also about in the 7th century, it left India and went to Tibet. And by that time, Buddhism in India had also developed Tantric Buddhism. And that also went to Tibet and a little bit to China and even a little bit to Japan. But mostly it was Tantric Buddhism made its way to Tibet. So in Tibet, they got the full download, you might say, of Indian Buddhism. They had the Hinayana teachings, the Mahayana, the greater vehicle. That's primarily the teachings that became, for instance, Zen or Chan in China, and many other schools. And they've got the Vajrayana teachings. So in Tibet, they'd organized these into these three vehicles, the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, each one having its own subdivisions. And we are now embarking on the Mahayana. Now, the Hinayana teachings have the virtue of helping us to achieve a degree of sanity. They help us clean up our neurosis. How? Well, through study, contemplation, and practice, but primarily through practice. The meditation practices of these vehicles are very simple, and they have to do with coming back from dreams into awareness in the present moment. The practice of shamatha and vipassana, which is what we do and what we just finished doing. We do this together. Shamatha is the practice of focusing one's mind one pointedly on an object. That object can be, for instance, the breath. It can also be a sound, might be a mantra, although you don't want to really confuse shamatha practice by injecting a kind of ideological, religious, doctrinal element into it. It's meant to be pure awareness of an object of meditation, a sound, and or the breath. Something as neutral as the breath. The breath is perfect because it has no religious overtones. And by coming back from dream into a pure awareness, we are achieving a degree of sanity, because dreams are fraught with untruths, with suffering, with anxiety. Dreams are always about me, I, and they're always about how to make things better for me, I, or how things were terrible and we don't want that again. It's always some story, some drama. So it's like a TV drama or a movie drama, and I am the hero or the heroine of these dramas. And that's what thought contains. And thought is always a fiction, or as Trungpa Rinpoche put it, a lie. Because this, right now, is what is true, is what is undeniable. The rest of it is just a description, and a very arbitrary one at that, from a particular point of view at a particular time and place. And it can be an outright lie. And even when it's an attempt at truth, it's not the real truth. Only the direct experience is utterly, completely true. And we get caught in these stories. And these stories are unhappy, always at their core. They're unhappy. Even when they're happy, they have within them the knowledge that that happiness is fleeting. It's just temporary. It's contained in the story. And so the Hinayana really is about cleaning up your mind by beginning to come back to the present moment and letting go of thought, which he refers to in this chapter as garbage, that we're cleaning up the garbage of our minds by coming back to this present moment, by switching our loyalty from these anxious, fear-ridden, hope and fear-ridden, judgmental dreams, always full of hope and fear and judgment, good and bad, and switching our loyalty from these stories to this pure awareness here and now. We do it through shamatha and vipassana, or to translate that into English, we do it through mindfulness practice and awareness practice. Mindfulness is the practice of coming back from dream and focusing your mind one pointedly on an object in the present moment. The breath is an excellent one because the breath only happens in the present, and because the breath contains no ideology, just an awareness object. And shamatha has the three virtues of one, We get a rest from the anxiety of thought, of dream. 2, we begin to see the extent to which we are spending our lives lost in thought, barely here, seeing this world through a veil of thought, and occasionally being awakened from those dreams and seeing things more vividly. And the third benefit is that we begin to develop the ability more and more of recognizing when we're in thought and coming back from it, coming back to awareness. Awareness practice is that, well, I mean, if you're doing shamatha, mindfulness practice, and you're working with the breath, as I say, this isn't the kind of thing you can do while you're having a conversation with somebody while you're driving your car. You could have a serious accident, right? If you're looking at the breath while you're driving your car. You want to do this while you're sitting down alone, right? So it's a very kind of solitary activity. But we can, having developed the muscle, as it were, of being able to come back from dream into awareness in the present moment, we can expand our awareness to include this whole environment that we're in, this space and this time. So we can be aware of this, and we can make this the object of our meditation. Now, in the beginning, when you practice awareness and you make this an object of meditation, there's a kind of artificiality to it, because you're turning this into a thing, this room, this space, wherever you happen to be, as though you could focus your mind on it. And there's this mind and me, and then there's this space. But the thing is that this space is real. You don't have to treat it like an object. It's here all the time. And so what begins to happen is, as we practice awareness practice more and more, it becomes less an artificial exercise of coming back to a thing, as it does become an exercise in coming back to what we already have, this natural, clear awareness, which is our very basic nature, our birthright. And this is the practice, these two practices are the practices of the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle. And so we achieve a kind of wholesomeness through our practice, because we are more and more, the more we practice, and practice is the key. And you study to support the practice, and you contemplate what you've studied to support the practice. But the practice is one of getting sane, coming back from these crazy dreams that inhabit our lives. And those dreams can get very, very crazy, as some of us know. And even when they're mild, they're distortions. So he says at the beginning of the chapter that through the Hinayana, we're achieving goodness. Goodness just means the wholesomeness of coming back to this, to our real lives, out of dreaming. And we're trying to overcome the suffering that exists in us. The suffering is contained mostly in those dreams. Now, there are two kinds of suffering, right? There's the suffering that is inevitable, like getting old, like being sick, like working hard, like breaking your leg. Those things hurt. They are not optional. They just happen to us. Old age, sickness, death. But what does also hurt and is optional is our complaint about it, our wishing that things were otherwise. So there's a slogan, I forget how it goes, something like, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. The suffering is wishing it were otherwise. That's contained in thought. That's what we come back from. And this is the practice of the Hinayana. So we begin to develop a real understanding of what is true in our lives and what is false. This is absolutely necessary. It's a wake up. Before we do these practices, we really believe our thoughts a lot. And even while we're doing the practices, we still believe our thoughts. So it's a matter of shifting one's loyalty from the dream of thought into awareness in the present moment. So the Hinayana notion of peace, which develops, become more peaceful, is giving up the constant grasping to try and buttress me, which is just an activity. It's a activity which has only one function, and that is to keep the story of I going. That's what it's for. And when that story stops, it's gone. And then there's just this open awareness, spacious, clear, and peaceful. He says we accomplish this by cultivating consciousness of every detail of our lives. We find that every situation in confused mind brings the pain of neurosis. And so we work to overcome it through our practice of awareness. And the sloppiness of this basic confusion of being lost in thought. We just jump from one thing to the next. It's really ridiculous. One minute we're thinking about A, next minute we're thinking about B, the next minute we're thinking about X. Just erratic. So the sloppiness of our confusion prevents the development of Mahayana greater vision. The greater vision is when we begin to not only come back, but begin to appreciate what it means to be back in this open space. And it means something very different than we thought, literally thought it meant. So we're cleaning up, we're getting rid of the garbage of our neurotic dreams of the past and the future. The Hinayanists would say that you could become good. That is, you can give up these aggressive dreams, which have to do with promotion of me. And the Mahayanists say that you are intrinsically good already, and that the obstacles to that are only temporary, and that what you're doing is rediscovering, each one of us, our basic nature, which is a much more beautiful and profound idea, and harder in a way to accept. He says, the constant repetitive practice of Hinayana monasticism, meaning, really strict practice, is fantastic. So shamatha produces peace, the absence of suffering, the suffering contained in dreams. And vipassana produces greater awareness. And when you practice them together, what begins to happen is that you begin to realize that your basic nature of who you actually are is awake, is Buddha. And as he puts it, that you have the Buddha seed within you. This is called Buddha nature. It's called Tathagata Garbha. Tathagata means the one who has gone beyond. He's gone beyond suffering. And Garbha means womb or essence. So it's kind of the essence of being a Buddha, one who has gone beyond. Gone to, actually, Tathagata actually means to gone to gata as it is, ta. And that's what a Buddha, an awakened one, is. He or she has gone to reality as it is. And we have the essence of that within us, the Garbha, the seed. And this is what the Mahayana is all about. It's about discovering this. And you don't have to be an extraordinary person to even have a hint of this, to discover this. Ordinary people do. They have flashes of it. They have moments of seeing, clear awareness, and seeing the difference, the freedom that comes, the difference between the world that we think about and the world as it is, as it arises now. The more we come back to this, the more it becomes natural and it begins to assert itself. You can't try too hard, because if you do, I gets in the way. I. But you can continue to do the practice, and these moments come of insight, opening, softening, heart. Like he says, the gradual awakening occurs as a result of discipline and sitting a lot, in spite of any neurosis that comes up. I mean, neurosis will continue to come. Absolutely. But more and more, there are these moments of opening, of appreciating this world as it really is, instead of as we hope it to be or fear it to be. He says the discovery of Buddha nature is not a myth, and it is not a matter of blind faith. It is very real, and it is the discovery of non-duality, transcending duality and karma making. What it means is that we begin to realize that this whole thing of I and other that has been dominating our lives was not true. It was just a construct, a story that came and went. And this is fundamentally, as he puts it, non-dual. You don't need I. He says, Buddha nature may seem too good to be true. You might think the whole thing is a bit lie, a big joke. So the birth of Mahayana spirit begins with a combination of distrust and the possibility of good news. You know, you're thinking maybe it's not, maybe it's all a shuck. Maybe it's all a con, they're just trying to convince me. But at the same time, one begins to experience it. And so those two things play back and forth. He says, joy and delight, which comes in flashes, initially, is wisdom jnana. That means wisdom, it's wisdom. And doubt or distrust is the seed of compassion. He calls it compassion. What does that mean? It means that we never lose what in the Shambhala teachings they call one's sad and tender heart. We're always motivated by a love for and a sadness for the suffering of this world. The Bodhisattva has a very sad and tender heart. And that sadness becomes compassion, resonating with the suffering of others. He says there's a sense of something touching your heart, and it is painful. So at this point, in this early stage, we're pregnant, as it were, with Buddha nature. It's all one has to do is keep practicing, and it comes almost in spite of us. We keep thinking we want to make it happen, and that desire to make it happen actually shuts it down, gets in the way. But it still comes regardless. He says the Bodhisattva's commitment, merit, and development continuously advance, even while you're unconscious or asleep or eating or doing daily work. This is the more you're committed to this path, the more you understand it, and are treading it. He says the joy transforms itself into acceptance and solidity. You're right here. And doubt, that sad and tender heart, becomes more like playful complaint. And you're still just having flashes, moments of Buddha nature, as well as more ordinary things. But he predicts that over time, that connection with this Mahayana vision becomes dominant. He says the only way to acknowledge your Buddha nature as a reality is to commit yourself to the path of the Bodhisattva. And you begin to realize that you belong to the family of the Buddha. You have inherited the genes of the Buddha, so you have no choice. This comes along. The more we practice, the more we tread this path with sincerity. So one of the things we've transcended at this stage is, or begun to transcend, is harming others. That always comes from involvement with these dreams of I and other. And we begin to do much less of that. And we begin further to be inspired to help others. A genuine inspiration. It's the only thing that makes sense. It begins to make more and more sense. He says, one problem that comes up, imposing our views on others, which is something we try to cut in our Mahayana approach to reality. This occurs when we do not really care that much for others at all. What we really want is confirmation of our existence, our own success and glory. So that's a danger on the path. It says there needs to be a genuine desire to say or do something for your own development as well as for others' benefit. For your own development as well as others. They call this achieving or pursuing the twofold benefit, I and other. It's not like you're going to sort of become utterly deprecatory or putting yourself down, but rather the benefit goes to both I and other. We each have intrinsic enlightenment within us, and it's like a gene that you can transmit from one life to the next. And that idea of a life could be literally life, dying and being reborn, but also in the course of this life, we live many lives. There's the life of eating dinner, there's the life of going to bed, there's the life of making love, there's the life of going to work, there's the life of doing all of these different things. And we could take this gene of appreciating this world, seeing it clearly, coming back to it, out of dream. So in the Mahayana, we begin to realize more and more that all of this is existing within us. And what we are doing by our practice is simply uncovering it. And more, we become inspired to help others in whatever way we can, in whatever way our talents take us, whatever way our circumstances allow. And this is produced by the idea that you are less important than the people around you. And this is based on warmth and compassion. The divisions between I and others begin to come down. One begins to contact others with heart, with love, with understanding. And we also begin to move into a very different world. This is called the world of emptiness, shunyata, and compassion. Emptiness, really, you see, is just what one discovers when one comes completely back from the stories. The stories are all about I and other, which is not emptiness. Emptiness is empty of I and other. It's this space here in which I and other are irrelevant, unnecessary, complications that we don't need. And when one comes back into this space of emptiness, you might call it, emptiness sounds like too negative a word. The space of reality. Then one can truly appreciate the beauty of everything that arises in it. And that is compassion. We're entering the same world, seen differently, understood differently. And this is important. He says, Mahayana, greater vision, means not having any goal, just doing the discipline for its own sake, rather than because of any promises. And this is very important. To the extent that we do it and we're saying, well, where's the payoff? Where am I going to get the goods? It all goes to hell. It just doesn't work. It turns dead. You just do it. And we're giving up the idea of I getting a reward. Such a habit we've got. Yeah, finally, we are cracking down the fortifications of ego's castle. It is a revolt against ego. Ego always wants to get something for me, for I. It's always got this agenda, this secret agenda in the back of that person's mind, in the back of my mind. There's this agenda. What am I going to get out of this? And that is what you will give up and come present into this world. He says, egolessness comes from non-goal orientation. The egolessness of self and the egolessness of other. They're more grounded, realistic, definite. Non-goal orientation. Giving up purpose. That doesn't mean you become stupid, but purpose in the sense of self-furthering. Giving that up. Oddly, the Bodhisattva, having transcended goal orientation, can nevertheless speedily attain enlightenment. Even though he or she given up goal orientation. But the more you give up goal orientation, the faster you get enlightened, because you're coming present instead of wishing for the future. He says, students of the Bodhisattva discipline have given up the possibility of getting anything for themselves. This planning, this strategizing. What am I going to get out of this? Therefore, they get a lot. That is a kind of joke, he says. Who was it? I think it was Samsara Kensei said, when you dedicate the merit and you give the merit away to all other beings, the dirty little secret is you get a lot of merit by giving it away. So finally, this last quote, the interesting point is that the actual reason we are prevented from attaining enlightenment right now, at this very minute, is because we want to attain it. Once that situation is changed, once it is completely switched around, we have no further obstacles to go through. We have no obstacles other than that. So we can begin to tune in through our practice. And it's not really a matter of tuning in, it's a matter of noticing that this world, when we come back from dream, come back to this present moment, has a warmth to it, a clarity, a vividness, an ease, a kindness for us. And that disappears every time we try to hold on to it, every time we forget and we go off into some dream or another of aggression or passion or stupidity. And then the more we practice, the more we remember to come back. And the more we practice Vipassana, the more we are coming back to this vast display, which is always our life, arising and passing away in the present moment. The only real world we'll ever know. This display as it arises and passes is constantly impermanent, not enduring even for an instant, nothing. The idea that there are things which endure is just that, an idea. In reality, everything is utterly transient, has no substance, a constant display like this gesture going across the computer screen. Like these words, which as they appear are dying. Just so everything. You look at that screen behind me and it seems to be static, but your perception of it was momentary. And it changes, as I'll do all our perceptions. The world we live in is a constant creation and a constant dying. They describe this world, they call it the Dharma Dhatu, the space of reality. And it's also called the womb. The womb and the graveyard. Everything is born, everything dies in it. It's quite beautiful. So we can have a discussion. Ooh, somebody's waving their hand. Oh, there's a leg.
You said that there's the sad and tender heart, I guess the phenomenon of the sad and tender heart that I take at some point that gets transformed into a bodhisattva heart, whatever that exactly is. And I wondered how and when that happens. But how does that, is there something you could say about that transformation?
From what I'm told, and I'm just passing this on, right? It never ends. The sad and tender heart, the brokenhearted. It's the compassion and love. And it's very different than depression. Depression is based on self-attack. The sad and tender heart is based on appreciation of the transience and beauty of this world and of people, of the people we know and love, who are dying around us all the time and being born. Beautiful little babies who will turn into corpses just like the rest of us. It's heartbreaking, you know, the beauty of it. So it never stops. It goes all the way through the Mahayana and the Vajrayana. That's sad and tender. Ed of Antonio.
So then how does the concept of nirvana enter this? If you're constantly aware of the sadness and engendering compassion, why do you want to escape it?
Nirvana as opposed to samsara as an alternative, is really a concept of the hinayana stage of the path, the primary stage, the first stage. At that stage, we come and we're full of suffering and we want to escape it. And so we conceive of this idea of escape from suffering and call it nirvana. But at the Mahayana stage of the path and beyond, they begin to say that samsara and nirvana are one, just like in the chant. How does it go in the chant? Third is the third stanza. I realize the inseparability of samsara and nirvana. That the suffering is the reality, that this heartbroken heartedness, as well as the pleasure, but it's all only takes place, that unity of the two, when one begins to come back from dream into this real world.
And that itself is enlightenment. There's no beyond state, if you will.
I'm not understanding the question, and I don't feel competent to talk about what is enlightenment, except theoretically. He said here at the end, he said, says that really the goal comes when you stop pursuing it. Egolessness comes from non-goal orientation. So really, we're being enjoined to wake up and be real, enter the real world, not a world that's a game where we're trying to, sort of get the goods, like move into heaven, move into nirvana, but to really become full human beings with heart, intelligence, awake here for the present. And we forget ourselves. That's being described. But it happens. It's not something you can pursue. By doing the practice of coming back from dream to awareness again and again in the style of the mindfulness and in the style of awareness practice, it just begins to happen. He used to say to us, just do it. It works. And to the extent that you're watching yourself and sort of giving yourself marks, like, oh, have I had a good meditation? I'd give myself a 75% for that, it will impede it. But we do that. Just be aware of it. Let it go. It's a habit. And that habit eventually wears out. Remember in the chant? I'm going to say, it says, how does it go about the chant about samsara and nirvana?
Realize the inseparability of samsara and nirvana.
That's it. That's it. Realize the inseparability of samsara and nirvana. I remember there's a Zen saying, takes it from a different angle. In the end, there is no Buddha, there is no Dharma, there is nothing profound. Just here. The very first publication that we ever did after Trungpa Rinpoche came to the United States, we created this magazine called Garuda. And in it, he put in a slightly modified version of the famous Zen woodcuts, the Japanese woodcuts, the ox herding pictures. And it's all about this, what we've been talking about tonight. Because in the beginning, the person chops wood and carries water. And then he goes on this long journey which is the spiritual path. And in the end, he chops wood and carries water. But it's really, there is an acknowledgement that goes along with waking up. The path is good. It's good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Mark. You're muted, Mark.
Hi. I was looking for my button. Hi. I have trouble with samsara and nirvana being connected. I mean, I understand. To me, samsara is being caught up in our nightmares, whether it's the past or the future. You know, our fantasies of the future, you know, our nightmares of the past. And nirvana to me is dropping all that. And that's where we gain a vision of what it means to be in nirvana.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the way I understand it too. But in the beginning, as we tread the path, we were watching ourselves very closely. We're saying, "Oh, I gave up my striving just then. I had a moment of flash." And of course, at that moment, you've co-opted it and you've lost it and you feel sad about it, and it's gone and you're looking at it in the rearview mirror. All that has to wear out. And it does, just by continuing to practice. The practice is the practice of coming back into the present moment,
Right.
cutting through dream.
All right, I just thought the way it was, that somehow it was all connected always. But I always felt like, I know we're not supposed to have a goal, but I would think you just want to be in the moment is what we are.
It's true. I mean, the Heart Sutra is all about that, in the end, they say there is no Buddha, there is no Dharma, there is nothing profound. No suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. This is the Heart Sutra. This is really Mahayana stuff, and it's just telling us, it's all this.
Right.
You can't strategize it.
Right. Thank you.
I think Barbara had her hand up earlier.
I did, yeah. Perhaps this point has been covered because I'm wondering how doubt becomes compassion. I do recall that doubt somehow is sadness, and sadness is a form of compassion, but I don't really understand that. Doubt is that, does doubt mean just like any kind of doubt? Or
I think it has to do with self-doubt. I mean, self-doubt is the most profound of all doubts, because then you feel that you're not in a good place, that you're not safe, you're not wholesome, you're not going to be happy. And Barry and I were trying to struggle with this one too. To me, the only way I can come around on this one is this idea of the sad and tender heart that the Bodhisattva, which is also a little bit counterintuitive, but that the Bodhisattva never loses that sad and tender heart, which is the heart of compassion. And doubt, he's saying, transforms into compassion.
okay, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, I think, if we think that we're going to wind up in some kind of orgasmic, ecstatic bliss, it's just, that ain't it. It's really a different kind of.
I suppose that if you're feeling doubtful, then you're not arrogant. you're vulnerable. And the vulnerability of the doubtfulness can lead to compassion for other people feeling the same thing. Would that be a way of understanding it?
Yes, I think so. I think you said it very well.
Okay.
And when
Thank
we
you.
have, when we appreciate our own self-doubt that we've gone through, and the doubt about all of this and our ability to tread the path, we can be much more compassionate for others, can't we?
Sure. Right.
Much more open and helpful and open-hearted for others, and with love and appreciation for them as they go through their struggles. And we resonate because we know we were there just a moment ago.
For sure. Yes. Okay. That's great. Thanks.
Meg, you look so thoughtful. This is very profound stuff, isn't it? Robert.
Good evening. Nice to see all of you again. It's a fascinating subject, compassion, for me, because I was such an arrogant, wise guy, much more than I am now. And I look at it as a space that gets created. It's not like a conversation. It's literally, for me, it's a space. And when I'm with people that are suffering, it's almost like there's a part of me that's going, oh, and to just be able to listen to that suffering, to my own suffering, to the suffering of someone else, provides an outlet with no comment, and it gets given up. And the person a lot of times will find, when we're listening to someone really intently, they feel better. It's just something, so it's like a relief.
Thank you.
I looked at, I was remembering something that you had said several times, John, about self-attack. And I'm wondering, is wanting to, after who would want to, it's the I that would want to, is wanting to attain enlightenment a type of self-attack? Can it become that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're onto it, yeah. Because we're saying this life isn't good enough. It's ego.
Or I'm not good enough. I'm not.
That's what ego always says.
Yeah.
That's ego's job. I. That's the job of I. Yeah. That's just self-attack, is pure I attacking.
Yeah, it's like anything but this. This can't be it. When this is the way out. Like the suffering is the way out. Without suffering, there's no, why would we want to do anything to get out of it,
They have so many names for this in so many different disciplines. I mean, in psychoanalysis, this is called the false self. In coaching, they call this the saboteur or the gremlin. And in tantric Buddhism, it's called the king spirit. The self. These are all the versions, different names for self-hatred, self-attack, which is ego's main job. And if ego has its way, its ultimate accomplishment is killing yourself, trying to. Jim Burbage always said you can't kill yourself because, ego's left.
I remember what you were saying about
Yeah.
chopping wood and carrying water, and the expression you had behind that, the Zen expression. Another one that I heard is, in the end, all that's left is a good laugh.
Okay,
Thank you.
anybody? Jane?
Hi, everyone. Two things, maybe three. Right at the beginning, chapter 3, in that first paragraph, I'm going to read just a sentence or two. This really resonated. It's so me. This is what I do all the time. We are actually paying attention to every detail in our lives. How we hold our pen, how we pour our cup of tea. Everything is scrutinized down to the very basis of our lives. And we find that every situation brings pain. So we try to overcome that pain, which started from ignorance, uncertainty, and bewilderment. So first I thought of the T.S. Eliot poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. You know, I grow old, I shall wear my trousers rolled. Do I dare to eat a peach? Shall I part my hair behind? And this litany of, and I sent you a poem called Life. And the sentence in that poem that really got to me, is it too cold to wear the yellow dress? Right? Is it too cold to wear the yellow dress? These are things that hang me up. So reading this, I was able to see myself and laugh at myself because the absurdity of it is clear when it's presented this way. And I felt much better about other things that I could relate this to, things I worry about, worrying about my children and trying to take control over their lives, because then I have some control over something. But that feeling of insight, it comes and it goes. So what it produces is another fear that I'll lose the feeling, and I'll just pull back into that, you know, do I dare to eat a peach? So I'm curious if that's part of just this back and forth, that when you get somewhere, then you're afraid you're going to lose it and be back to before you had it.
This is a question?
Yes, that's the question.
Well, there's,
Is anything, I mean, if it's in the moment, it's then only in the moment. And once the moment is gone, it's gone.
well, the thing is that in the beginning stages of the path, we have experiences which are discontinuous with our ongoing daily experience. They stand out. And we would like to be able to hold on to them, but we can't, because the very act of trying to hold on to them,
Right,
they go.
right,
And we regard them as an experience that we would like to recreate.
right.
But the further we go along the path, the more we practice,
Yeah.
we begin to realize that this isn't a matter of having particular experiences. It's a matter of understanding and acknowledging what is real. And when that begins to happen, then it doesn't go. Because that is really the progress on the path. That is really when you begin to realize that this is true.
Mhm.
You're not trying to create this experience like having an orgasm, which is so temporary. So it's really a matter of discovery, that we are discovering what is real on this path. And when we discover it, you can't turn around and lose it. You see the difference?
Yes, that's comforting. That makes sense. That's helpful. Thank you.
And the way we do it is through practice. Practice, and then, thinking about the practice and these kinds of study situations.
Right. Right.
And bringing our practice, especially if you can, just in moments, into your daily life, into one's daily life. Trying to come back and see this world that we live in our daily lives, as open, without judgment, clear, present. We bring that kind of clarity to its meditation and action. Then it gets really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's harder in daily life to do it because we have so many triggers,
It is hard.
things that trigger us back into habitual patterns. And so that's why we sit, because when we sit and we become still in our body, then we can begin to see something that it's harder to see in daily life.
Sometimes it transfers automatically. I think of it sometimes in the morning when we're all talking about the weather from wherever we are, and we're sitting with the temperature, and the humidity, and kind of perseverating on that. Why is weather and the temperature so defining? I mean, it is what it is. If it's cold, you put on a sweater. If it's hot, you wear something light. But we all have this way of responding to it, or letting, what the weather is. It has a significance, I think, beyond what it really is. I don't know. It's one of those, it's a sensory thing. It's part of what we take in our consciousness through our senses. That's hard to let go of.
What I hope for everybody here is that your practice becomes stronger and stronger, and that we can do group practice together. And I'm looking into it here, but also that you can do solitary practice, retreat. For me, there's nothing more powerful than solitary retreat. I mean, most people have never been truly alone in their lives. When you go into retreat, you give up all the little things that keep you company.
Mm-hmm.
No TV, no writing, very, very, very little reading, no music, cell phones are off. And it's just, again, as Trungpa Rinpoche put it, an opportunity to meet your mind. But it's also a sense of really being alone and what that's like. It's very powerful. The people that spend years in retreat. But, so I hope my hope for everybody here that you get to experience that in your life. Because mostly we're just sort of filling up the space with distractions a lot of the time. Except when we sit. We sit down, do our practice, giving up distraction.
John, I have another question. Did you say something to the effect that our ego is it acts naturally as critical of oneself, putting oneself down?
Ego is constantly saying, things are not good enough. How can
Oh,
how can
like
they be better?
complaining.
How can they be better? And it
Oh.
might be, so, you know, if you think a lot of yourself, that's just another form of ego, right? You know, self
Yeah.
pride.
Right.
But you're also saying everybody should admire me more. You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So, okay, so if you're defensive, if you're arrogant, if you are overly protective, then what that's all saying really is that things aren't just as nice as you'd like them to be.
That's ego's job.
That's ego's job, is to complain and criticize and not just be content with what is.
Because you
Okay.
see, ego doesn't actually exist except as a story. So it needs a story to keep itself going. And you come up with all kinds of stories. Even pain can be a story.
Mhm.
You know, fear is a really good one. Who's afraid? I'm afraid. Yeah. All these stories, pride, passion, they give I a raison d'etre, as it were, you know, a statement. Because as soon as the story ends, I disappears.
Uh-huh.
Gone.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about how ego is like everybody has an ego, and that's a result of evolution. So the purpose of ego in terms of evolution is to protect oneself, to think about oneself a lot and protect oneself. But then when you take that too far and you're overly protective or overly jealous or angry or any of those obstacles, then that's like taking a natural something that's natural and allowing it to go too far in one direction, which is what makes ego not so nice, not working for you, creating unhappiness. Is that the right line of thinking?
I don't want to pass on right or wrong here. I think this. What these teachings are telling us is that ego is utterly unnecessary and is counterproductive. That it produces unhappiness, not happiness.
Uh-huh.
And that we can live very sane, commonsensically sane lives without
Uh-huh.
without it.
Uh-huh.
It's just not necessary. It's an error. It's a mistake. And it's called this over and over again in the teachings, an error.
Mm.
Word in Tibetan is trulpa. That's what ego is. It's an error. An error of thinking that I'm here and I have to protect myself. Because
Uh-huh.
you can protect yourself. You can do what's commonsensical for this body and this life much more effectively. Without
Yes.
ego. In fact, the stronger, the more active ego becomes, the crazier a person becomes.
Right. Right. Okay. Great. Well, it's gotten me thinking about these things
That's
and
good.
making some sense out of them. Sure. Thank you.
Well, friends, I think maybe unless there's somebody with a burning statement to make or question, we could end. Kurt, did you have something? No? Okay. So Robert, I think we're gonna, okay, go ahead. Last one.
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
And he meant it in such a different way than we're taking it.
Everything has at least two meanings.
Because he really believed in that he was. This is Descartes, Rene Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But from a Buddhist perspective, yeah, it works. It's funny. Thank you. Well, friends, let's close with the dedication of merit. And remember that by giving away the merit, you get more. Unless you think that way. It's tricky. Let's see, here we go. Okay. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.
Sickness and death.
From the ocean of
From the
samsara.
ocean of samsara, may I free all beings.
By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Tomorrow evening discussion.
We're having discussion tomorrow, right? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I missed you. Yeah, I missed your hand. I just saw a note in chat.
Yeah, sorry about that, Valerie. I didn't see the chat.
Want to say anything
My
now?
fan. That's my disturbing fan.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Nice, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good to see you, George.